So can I just start by saying shebang-a-bang and salami? It's been a while since we last recorded. In fact, it's probably been about 30 to 40 seconds.
It has.
So I hope you're recharged with new ideas for this new episode.
I am, and this is I'm on the same iced coffee as the last episode. So this may be the first time in history that one iced coffee has spread across 2 episodes of a podcast. I mean, surely that wouldn't have happened before.
It's history. History in the making.
Yeah. This is a classic Farmers Union iced coffee, which is pretty, it seems,
nice.
It's an Adelaide tradition.
I mean, I don't like them, but I know you love them.
And I never have these except when we're recording it. It's a bit of a nice treat for when we're recording. So it's a bit of a podcast tradition for me.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you. You must have them. You love them. They're like your crack cocaine.
I used to have a lot of them, but I don't anymore. No, I can't do it. I can't. I can't.
You can't admit to it.
I can't admit to it. It's too hard to say. Do you remember back when I was in that share house and you'd come and stay?
Yeah.
Me and the other guy, Graham, were drinking so many, and then we'd rinse them and throw them on a pile. And we had that big pile of empty ones in the corner of the kitchen.
What did you do? Did you turn it into some kind of art installation, or did you make like a wall out of it or something?
It was kind of, he did something with them before we got rid of them, but yeah, they were just a massive pile. It was a massive kitchen, like it was it wasn't like we were climbing over them to get to the sink or anything. Yeah, that was crazy. We were drinking so many.
And he could afford more of them because he had a job. He was like a millionaire to us because he worked at a local KFC.
Yeah, that's right. So not only was he earning money, he was earning chicken. So he would bring home some leftover chicken.
That's right. Oh, it was like a god. And he had a car.
Yeah, I know.
It was
the legendary
amazing.
Combi. That was like a summer of love, like a lost summer. That was great.
That was the last few months before I started my first job. Like I had gotten the job but hadn't started yet. And like you had like a house, a shared house, a DOS house with a bunch of others.
Yeah.
And it was like I could just like, I don't know, sit around and watch TV.
Well, that was kind of what we did.
What did we do?
Well, we played Monopoly, and we've talked about that before, the legendary games of Monopoly. But remember, we also played
a game of Monopoly. We surely did other things besides that one game of Monopoly that I remember.
We watched the cricket because I remember that was the summer when Warney got his hat trick. This is Shane Warne got a hat trick, which means he got 3 people out. I'm now explaining to everyone who doesn't understand cricket, who listens to our podcast around the world.
What does out mean, Tim? You have to explain the entire rules of cricket now.
Out means that you were batting and then you're no longer batting.
No, you don't have to explain. What? I guess we went to Marion Shopping Centre a lot, and we wouldn't have bought KFC because Graham got us that for free. But
we played those legendary games of like hide and seek in the dark. Remember that, the murder in the dark game?
Oh yeah. Do
you remember that? When this is
you just hide. You just turn all the lights out and hide,
and people would hide. But it sounds crazy. Except it was a large house and it was pitch black. And so you could hide. And so one of the places to hide was standing on the fridge. And people would walk past it and they wouldn't see you. And you'd be up in cupboards and hiding in tiny places behind. Yeah, that was amazing.
So we sound like we were like 12 years old. We were playing Monopoly and hide and seek. How old were we?
This is why you leave home. So you
can play. And our mums couldn't stop us.
It's time for me to grow up. I'm moving out so I can play Monopoly and hide and seek.
We kind of missed the point of moving out, didn't we?
That's right.
Our families were like, why aren't you going out and drinking and meeting girls? And we're like, why would we do that when we could play Monopoly?
But remember Graham had that legendary Combi that we used to that we painted in so many colours and then drove around town.
Oh yeah, the VW Combi van. Yeah. I wasn't there the day that was painted. I kind of felt a bit excluded there. Didn't you paint it with house paint?
We used all sorts of things. Like I painted Achtung Baby on the side, and we had Jabba the Hutt and like all sorts of cool stuff all over it, all multicoloured. And we'd drive around town and people would suddenly go, and there it is.
It's those Monopoly hide and seek guys.
These guys are crazy. We have the back open. Wow. Yeah, that was a strange time.
It was.
with no money and not enough nutrition in our diet, I just moved home after about 3 months in order to sort of get fed back into health again and start getting some order in my life. But my Monopoly and hide and seek days were over. And why were we talking about that? Oh, iced coffee. Oh, yeah. So iced coffee was standard part of the diet at that time.
So podcasts.
Yeah. I've got an idea that I really, I'm quite keen to share, actually. This is, again, the name escapes me, but I've gone with the name Lost Watch. Yep. It really is about watches, but essentially the idea is that I think watches have a unique ability to gain or glean memories. Like they're attached. How people get watches is often quite meaningful. People get watches for special occasions like their 21st or retirement. Yep. But they also seem to be part of adventures as well in a particular way. And there's the scene in Pulp Fiction that centers around the watch. So people coming and talking about their watches and where they got their watch, not so much how cool the watch is or the brand of watch or the latest watch, although, that might be related to it, but how people got it is great. But in particular, I've got a couple of amazing stories of like lost watches. And so I just wonder whether that's something particular about a watch that's been lost and then found again after years and all those sorts of things, whether that's a common story to other people as well. But you're quite a watch connoisseur, aren't you? You love your watches.
I am. I mean, first of all, let me say, I'm sure there are a million watch podcasts, and if something matching this exactly doesn't already exist, I will be shocked. But still, I love that you brought it up, Tim, because I love talking about watches, as you know. I have gotten very into watches, especially more in recent years. But I've always loved them. I've always loved, if you're going to a second-hand store and they'll just have like a big box full of watches, I love going through them and imagining what the stories are associated with them and what tales they've had. I've sort of gotten now into more kind of high-end watches, but I do like ones that have got like stories associated with them and like a pedigree. For example, I've mentioned before, I have the same style of watch, the Omega Speedmaster Professional, that was worn by the astronauts on the moon, because I'm really into the moon landings, of course. So I've got one of them. And I've also got two other watches that are the two types of watches that were worn by Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay when they first got to the top of Mount Everest, which is another favourite adventure of mine. So that's another thing I've got. And so I quite like watches that have got a story like that. I've also got a real soft spot for the watches of my childhood. So I obviously, like most kids, had like a calculator watch when I was, in the 80s. Yeah. But I've bought another one of them now because I just like to have it. And a watch that I haven't re-bought yet that I absolutely loved when I was a kid, and a friend of mine had it, and I coveted it so much that eventually my mum bought me one, and I was so happy, is the Citizen Windsurfer watch, which is a digital watch that had all sorts of little displays and timers and things on it, that it was just like, a really complicated, overly complicated digital watch that I thought was brilliant. I must get myself one of them just for old time's sake. I remember my dad wearing a watch when I was young, but I don't think he's got it anymore, and I don't know if it had any special meaning. I don't know if it was the watch he wore in the war or stuff. I don't think it was, but I don't think he has that watch anymore. He's just got a different one. I don't know what happened to his watch, because obviously the whole passing down to your sons and daughters is a big thing with watches.
So the stories behind the watches is interesting.
Yeah, I like a watch to have a story. What about you?
The reason I went with Lost Watch was because I've got a couple of unique stories about losing watches, which kind of has added value to the watch in a particular way. But I don't have any particularly valuable watches except through sentiment. I have a couple of watches that are very sentimental, surprise, in their value for me. I do appreciate nice watches. I've seen an older version, I can't remember what year it was, of the Omega Seamaster, and I like that. I like the look of that sort of classic sort of feel.
Yeah.
It's a bit James Bond.
I could talk to you a lot about Seamasters.
Oh, yeah,
I've got another Seamaster on order at the moment.
Oh, right, okay. Well, that's good. Yeah, but I like the older ones as well. I've seen one, I think it was around the 70s. Do they go back that far? I imagine they do, actually. I imagine they go right back, yeah. They do bulk up quite a bit in more recent times, don't they?
They have a bit. So they're bringing out an anniversary. Well, they were supposed to bring it out last year, but it's been delayed. It's coming out later this year. An anniversary one, which is new and with modern movement, so it works well. But it's based on the 1958 design, and I'm trying to get my hands on one of those. But they're sort of all booked. They're all like reserved and booked out. They're impossible to get, but I'd love one of those. They're lovely. Anyway, what about your sentimental ones, or are they too sentimental to talk about in such a public forum?
Oh, that's right. Yes, I can't possibly comment. And that's the end of this episode. No.
Today we have another guest that won't talk about a personal thing because it's just too personal.
Well, there's one watch that I got, and it's sentimental to me because it was bought as a gift for a dear friend. He didn't want it. My dad bought it off him and gave it to me as a gift when I got my first degree.
Right.
So that's got a lovely connection for me, and that was enough. That already makes it like a treasured item because of the people involved, and that's lovely. I've worn it for years and years, but the reason, I guess my podcast hones in on a particular, the narrative around a watch that's kind of, lost and then found again, I guess. But this particular story was I wore it to a music festival called the Falls Festival, and which is one of those ones you go and you camp and, there's a stage and there's thousands of people.
Is this the same watch or another watch story now?
This is the same watch. This watch, I wore it there,
right,
and I wore it all day, seeing bands and enjoying them, moving from, different stages and all that kind of stuff. I got back to my tent at night and realised it was gone. Oh. And you're like, well, when's it gone? I've dropped it during the day. It's been 12 hours since I left my tent. Impossible. And I went to bed, or I was about to lay down in my sleeping bag, and I thought, I've got to at least have a look. And this is like midnight. And the end of the night, it's dark everywhere. There's some floodlights around, but they're just... I walked out of my tent and looked down at this massive area, and it's all glistening with like beer cans and stuff. So it's like, how am I going to find something like that? And I thought,
a festival site after everyone moves away is like...
Oh, yeah. There was just ridiculous. A few crowds of people, a few here, there and everywhere, heading off to bed. It's just like, this is ridiculous. And I'm like, but I'm just going to lay awake thinking. And I thought, I'll give it a go. So sure enough, I walked down the hill, back into the festival site, went to one stage, I went over here to this other band, I went down, and to cut a long story short, after quite a while just walking around, I walked down and I suddenly looked down in the grass, and there it was. I found it in this massive, massive field of things, and I stood there and I was just looking at it going, I can't believe, there it is. I can't believe it.
That's amazing. So it wasn't like somewhere you would have expected, like just outside your tent or somewhere that you knew you'd been. You sort of just found it in a random spot.
It feels ridiculous. It was between walking from one stage to another stage, in the dark, in the long grass. Like it was just, I still can't even quite believe that it happened. But I found it and I put it on and I went back to bed with it, and it was like, you're laying in bed going, that's crazy. That's a crazy miracle that I was able to find.
Was there any evidence or any clue as to why it had come off your wrist? Like, was the band broken or something? Or?
Oh, from time to time, that kind of happens. It gets a big loose. On the day, I don't remember any reason why it fell off. No, I don't remember it.
Is it still your watch now? Is it your day-to-day watch now?
Well, it was. I wore it for a long time, up until about 2 years ago. When it was kind of retired. It was retired because I actually had been looking for another watch, and and I had noticed a friend interstate had a watch that I liked the look of because it had sort of a square classic sort of look, and I quite not that square is necessarily classic, but it looked good. It looked sort of unpretentious and understated but classy, and I liked it. And I always commented on it. Yeah. I once asked him the brand so I could go looking for it, but they didn't make them anymore. And, it's not a particularly expensive brand or anything, so it was actually really hard to find.
Yeah.
And because every time I'd see him, which is like maybe once or twice a year I'd mention it, it became like a little thing between us until finally he was in town speaking at an event, and I said, oh, you've got another watch? And he goes, yeah. And then a little while later, his other watch turned up in the mail. He just sent it to me. And so I've kind of got his watch now, and I put a new band on it, and I wear that because I couldn't find one that looked like it.
Yeah.
So now I wear the one that he gave me. So that's a nice connection as well. I really quite like that.
That is nice. I feel a bit sad for the watch of amazingness though. Like that feels like that's a life watch after all those stories, but I guess not. I mean, I know you still got it, but
it has a kind of a treasured. It's almost like I really don't want it to get stolen or ruined, but I don't really want to wear it.
Right.
It is nice, but I don't love the way it looks anymore. But it's kind of more precious than that, and so it sort of sits on top of my kind of dresser area where I have, like my rings and where you put your watch at the end of the day. It's kind of sitting there as well. So it's part of, I get to enjoy the fact that I have it, but I don't really wear it. But yeah. So anyway, I still can't believe that I found it like that. But I'll tell you another story, and this is about my wife's watch. This is a story. We went to a wedding on the way to the airport one day in Collingwood, which is a suburb inner city Melbourne. We went along, we had our bags in the back of our friend's car, and we went and ducked into this wedding of a friend that we wanted to get to the wedding but then had to rush to the airport afterwards before the reception. So we enjoyed the wedding with our bags in the car. We came back to the car and the window had been smashed and our bags were all gone. And this is not surprising for Collingwood. In fact, we were a bit silly to have left our stuff in the car in retrospect, but it was all gone. We lost our clothes and was like, oh my goodness. So we ended up catching a taxi to the airport, making the flight with no clothes, turning up at the other end and, my dad picked me up. This was coming to Adelaide one day and we went to the shopping centre and bought some clothes and toothbrush to use the next day. And, oh well, whatever. My laptop was gone, clothes were gone. That's a shame. Oh. But more importantly, my wife realised that her precious watch had gone, which was a gift from her mum. It had been her mum's watch all her life. So, that was devastating. That was really very devastating. And, you sort of eventually come to terms with it. Well, it's gone. It's been sold at Cashies or whatever. And so we called up the police and registered that our things had been stolen, but specifically named this watch and described it. And you sort of think, well, I hope one day we get it back, and never thinking it would. Years later, a couple of years later, she suddenly gets a call from the police. And a policewoman calls and said, I'm calling. Are you the owner of this particular watch? And, could you describe it? And it turns out this policewoman had been involved in some police business and had been in someone's apartment and had come across this watch and had been suspicious about it and the circumstances under which she, that it was there and whose apartment it was in and all the rest of it, and ended up getting it and cross-checking it and found that it was, I think through the name on the back, which was her mum's name in the town.
So it had an engraving on it.
An engraving, that's right. And located it through and came all the way back. And so after 2 or 3 years, we got this beautiful watch back. So we have both.
What was your wife's reaction? Was it just like,
shock,
what a surprise, or was it really emotional? Or
like, it just felt like, again, it felt like a bit of a miracle. Like, who would have thought? Like, it could have ended up anywhere, could have been sold. Yeah. You know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. And I think hers is actually quite valuable, more than sentimental. But it was just sort of like, it's like it's gone, and then you get it back again. It's just like you treasure it and hold it. Oh, how beautiful. And she still wears it now from time to time. So we kind of have these two treasured watches with sentimental value that we lost and that were found again.
I mean, there are two things going on here, man. One thing is a podcast about watches, which, I'm totally up for, of course. But if you're going to do it about lost and found, like, you almost don't want to restrict yourself to watches, because there are always interesting stories about people who, lost their wedding ring and then it grew into a carrot in the backyard, and one day you're eating a carrot and the ring falls out and things like that. So, like, that actually happens sometimes. Like, stuff gets into plants and things, and so if you broaden it beyond watches and especially include rings, because there are millions of stories about lost and found rings, I think you'd be on a bit of a winner there.
Yeah, you're right. That's a whole thing in itself, isn't it? Yeah. Do you have anything like that? Have you got something that you've miraculously found again that's come back to you?
I have. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone has some of those. Yeah, and they're all those moments when you think you've lost something and you find it on the ground or something, and a day or two later. I do have a lot. I remember being at a music festival again and losing a camera, a stills camera that had all my holiday pictures from Japan on it, and thinking, well, that's that gone. But because it was in Japan and everyone's so unbelievably honest, someone had found it and had handed it into Lost and Found.
No, that's great.
So I just went to the Lost and Found an hour or two later, and they go, oh, yep, here's your camera. Handed it back to me.
No, that's great.
Whereas, most other places you'd think a really expensive camera, you might not see that again.
What's the worst thing you've lost? Like, what have you lost and you've gone, oh, geez, that still hurts to think that you lost it?
I'm struggling a bit thinking on the spot, but I mean, I do lose things a bit. And there's two different types of lost, isn't there? There's like that invasive, shocking lost when you realise you've lost it, like you drop something or it's like it vanishes. And then there's that other kind of just lost in the mists of time lost, like, oh, whatever happened to that thing I had that I wish I still had? And you can't think for the life of you where it's gone. And that's that kind of more stealthy, gradual... Hang on, it's a doorbell, hang on. You there?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, there was just a guy at the door there returning the Swiss Army knife my dad gave me when I was 12.
Man, this is about watches. Get back on track.
Sorry.
I Googled lost watch, and all that came up was like opportunities to watch Lost, the TV show.
Well, that would be another podcast. Not quite as interesting. I'm sure after we finish recording, I'll think of some cracking story of something I lost. But my dad has a cool item, but it resulted in him losing something else cool. So when he was a soldier in the Vietnam War, like all soldiers, he had like the Australian slouch hat, that classic hat that Australian soldiers wear.
Yeah.
And as he was about to leave the war, he was with an American soldier, and the soldier was saying, "Oh, I love your hat." And my dad really liked his Zippo lighter that he had.
Oh, yeah.
The soldier, like it had his like name was engraved on it, the soldier's name and his rank and stuff like that. And it had, I think it must have had like the crest of whatever his affiliation was in the military. And Dad traded his slouch hat for this Zippo lighter. And I think as the years went on, he may have regretted it. He kind of wished he still had his slouch hat from the war. But I always thought this Zippo lighter was really, really cool because this was when Zippo lighters were a bit rarer. I mean, everyone has one now, but they were a little bit of a less common thing to see. And, you know, it had been through the war and it was engraved with this soldier's name. You know, I'd always say, "What's that name on your lighter, Dad?" And he explained it was this soldier. And it was cool. And he actually did use it. Like it was his operating lighter. I don't know what he does with it now, but you know, Zippos last forever. I always thought that was quite a cool thing, and to me it was kind of cooler than a hat. I guess now that I'm a bit older and wiser, I can see that the hat would have been maybe better to have. But
well, the Zippo lighter he was able to use and have around with him. The hat, obviously, he's not just going to wear the hat to work, is he? Like, but
no.
So you got to use it, which is kind of nice, but I guess it's a little bit rare.
And you know, it was, you know, and my dad's a smoker, so he would use it every day, you know, this cool lighter. So
yeah. What's the rarest watch in the world? Like, do you have any watch trivia about that? Like,
I can give you some good trivia about moon watches because
right.
The Omega Speedmaster, that was the NASA approved that as the watch for the astronauts to wear in space. So on the first and most important moon landing, Apollo 11, there was a problem, I think, with like the clock in the landing craft, the Eagle. So Neil Armstrong took his off and left it in the ship as like the ship clock. So he didn't wear his on the moon.
Oh.
They had this big long strap you could put, so they could put over the big fat cuffs of the moon suit, so you'd wear it outside your moon suit.
Oh wow!
Not the normal band you get on a Speedmaster. It was a big black. I think it may have been a NATO, but it was made big and fat. So Neil Armstrong didn't wear his on the moon. Buzz Aldrin did. The second man on that moonwalk.
Yeah.
And he then went to send his watch to the Smithsonian. He was going to donate it so it could be, put on display with all the cool moon stuff like the moon suits and all that. And it went missing in the post and has never been seen or heard from again.
Oh, no.
So the watch that was worn on that first moonwalk is no one knows where it is. The other ones that were worn on subsequent moonwalks, you do sometimes see in various museums and stuff. I've seen them around the place and, it's cool to see them. But that precious one, gone. Lost. A lost watch.
A lost,
of course.
There you go.
Lost watch.
That's the ultimate lost watch. Are you sure he's not
Yes.
just saying that he didn't lose it on the moon? Like, that would be the one. If you can't find it anywhere, that's the only place left to check.
Where did I leave it? Damn it, where was I? Oh,
Where was it?
Where did you last see it? Well, the moon.
I walked onto the spacecraft. I got off the spacecraft. Well,
Yeah.
did you get off? Oh, the moon. Damn it. Did you...
Go and retrace your steps.
That would just top my, music festival losing story. The moon. It's
Years
on the
later, when we
moon.
go back to the moon, someone's wandering around.
At least
There it
it
is.
hadn't moved. At least it'd still be
It
there.
definitely wouldn't move. Yeah.
Was Omega chosen... Is it Omega or Omega? What do you say?
I say Amiga, you say Omega.
Were they chosen because of a sponsorship deal with NASA or because of their quality? Like, it was like, we want the best...
I believe it went through like a rigorous process and various brands were tested and they tested all different types of criteria, like to do with vacuums and magnetism and stuff like that. And the Omega performed the best and therefore was chosen. I don't think at least, I don't think money changed hands. At least
Right.
I don't think officially that's any position. But I tell you what, it was the greatest marketing coup of all time for Amiga because they make an absolute fortune out of it, and they go hard on it.
Yeah.
It's interesting though because they were the only ones that were approved. But on a later lunar mission, another astronaut, unauthorized, took a different brand of watch to the moon and wore that. Like, bit naughty. But it means Amiga can't use the only watch used on the moon sort of thing. So they always say, you always see in their promotions now, first watch worn on the moon, because they know they can't sneakily say only watch worn on the moon.
So that other watch was like a disruptor, like Uber getting in and ruining.
It was
the moon.
It's like the
watch.
Apple Watch.
Yes, that's right.
It was. Yeah. What do they call that? Ambush marketing or something?
Oh,
don't
yeah,
they?
yeah.
When it's like when Coke sponsors the Olympics, and then you put up a bunch of Pepsi billboards just outside the stadium or something.
That's right. The what about with James Bond? Because Omega's also famous for the James Bond connection.
Not cool with me, man.
What do you mean?
Getting a watch with 007 written on it, because whenever there's a new Bond movie, they'll bring out a new watch, which is the one he's worn in that movie. But it'll always have like a little 007 or something on the dial and that. And I think that's so naff.
No, that's great. That's tacky.
Yes, thank you.
No. I was just wondering if the connection is classic. Like if there was a reason. If it's just like, well, Sean Connery just happened to be wearing one in the first one, and then it became.
Well, no, that's money. Because that's money, man. Because in the books, apparently, James Bond wears a Rolex. And I think in the first Bond movie, maybe, he also wears a Rolex. And then Omega just came in and bought the rights. They just handed over money and said, we want him to wear Omegas. And he's worn them ever since. So that's pure product placement.
My earliest watch memory was wearing my mum's watch, which was it was that classic silver Casio, you can get again now.
Yeah.
And I thought that looked cool. And I used to wear that. And I have this image of me walking over on a Friday night to buy fish and chips at the fish and chip shop with like wearing a jacket with it pushed up to my sleeves and wearing mum's.
Thinking you're really cool with your ladies' Casio. Thinking you're the T-birds.
The little ladies' Casio, which is sort of dangling on my arm, so it's a bit like a bangle. And I...
just to give it that extra feminine touch.
That's right. And I just remember walking along feeling so cool and sophisticated that I was out walking along with this cool-looking...
At least you know you're not going to get mugged for that watch.
Kind of wish I hadn't told that story. It was a cool moment in my mind, but the day I finally
I stayed at a hotel in Buenos Aires, and at the reception desk they had like a warning sign that specifically said, "Do not wear Rolex or Omega watches out of the hotel."
Really? Wow. Is that because they wanted to leave them in the hotel so they could, grab them?
Yeah. They said it's only safe to wear loose-fitting women's Casio digital watches.
That's right. Please leave your Rolex sitting on your bedside table while we clean your room.
Okay, Tim, here we go. Storyblocks are back as show sponsor. You pleased about that?
Oh, yeah, no, this is good. I think this is super handy. Not for anything I do, but...
So, Storyblocks is I guess you would call it a service where they have like stock footage. They also have images and audio, but they've got lots and lots of stock video that you can use for your creations, B-roll footage if you're making like, a YouTube video or something, or you need a video background for a website. They've got After Effects templates, all sorts of stuff, everything you could possibly need when you're creating. It's like this library that you can dip into and use whatever you want, unlimited times, royalty-free. They've got this huge library. They've also got this secondary library called the Global Marketplace, which people have contributed. And you can also use that material for a fee. And if you're a member, it's a lower fee than if you're not a member. So you'd be crazy not to sign up if you do anything creative or you ever need stuff like that. If you happen to be a professional YouTuber, like me, for example... You want to have a Storyblocks account for sure.
Or if you happen to be friends with a professional YouTuber, like me, for example.
Yes.
You can let them know about...
You also should have an account. Tim and I quite enjoy going through the Storyblocks archive when we're here on the show to see... For example, let's say that right now I needed to make a video about watches.
Well, I'm way ahead of you.
See what...
I'm on it. And I tell you...
you're already looking, are you?
Oh, it's endless. It's phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
There's a huge amount.
So they've got all this archive material. They've also got really like professionally done stuff. Like I'm looking at some uber close-up macro shots of springs of watches and things working. So if I was doing something about watches, this is stuff that, you know, I wouldn't be able to make myself. And all kinds of watches. I see pocket watches here. I see smart watches. Watches and all being used in all sorts of ways. Whatever you're making a film about, whatever you're creating, Storyblocks is going to have that killer shot, that amazing thing you need, that one shot you like, oh, and sometimes it's a shot you couldn't possibly do yourself. I need a bird flying over a mountain or something, and, you know, there's no mountain here for me to film. How am I going to get that shot? They're going to have it. Do they have a bird flying over a mountain? Bird, mountain, sorted. Multiple times. Anyway, let me give you the details. If you do want to join up with Storyblocks and have a look at them, go to storyblocks.com/unmade. That's storyblocks.com/unmade, and just help yourself to this incredible archive of material that's going to make your creations really pop and really add some value.
Yeah, this is amazing. Look, it's got pretty girl looks annoyed. Nice girl sits on bench. Handsome man looks at his phone. Mother, like, it's just every possible situation you could ever possibly want. There's like several bits of footage for. It's unbelievable.
Something I often need for my creations are explosions, like really good explosions, particularly explosions that have got like a plain background or an alpha channel or something, so that I can put it over something else, like as an effect. Oh, yeah. And Storyblocks, like, when you go through their video collection, they've got like a crazy number of excellent explosions. So, you know, it's just stuff like that, or stuff you never think you never know what you're going to need. Oh, I need a planet rotating, or things you couldn't possibly even film if you wanted to, and maybe you know, there's stuff you can't get somewhere else. They'll have it, you know, and they'll have it in HD and 4K. And check them out, storyblocks.com/unmade. Make sure you use the /unmade so they know you came from here. Thanks, Storyblocks, for supporting our podcast.
Thank you. All right, man. On to you. Your idea.
I literally can't decide what one to do. All right, I'm going to... Go on, advise me.
We haven't had many laughs. This has been a bit more serious, so a few laughs.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. That you've changed my mind then. I was going to go with something quite serious. I'll go for something funny. I haven't even thought about this one, but it's deep down on my list of ideas. This one I'm going to call... let's call this Time Capsule, right?
Right.
And this would be making a podcast with the specific purpose of being a time capsule for people 1,000 years in the future.
Oh, that's great.
You talk as if you're talking exactly to them. They're your only audience, and you want them to know what our world and society and life is like now, and you're talking specifically to them.
I love it.
So you want to, and so everything's being explained, and partly it's interesting because it's interesting to see how you as the presenter, what you think is going to be useful and what they need to know, and what's going to be assumed knowledge, but also just like, you know, this is how we travel. We have these things called cars. We put this liquid into them called petrol, which comes, you know, you explain, which comes from, you know, oil, and you have to explain what oil is. This is fossilized stuff, and then you have to say and then we burn it, and and all the different things, or just like how life works, how we date, or how we get married, or things like that. So, time capsule.
Well, one thing that's interesting is that we know more about the past than we do about the future. So there's so there's a sense by which those things will be known because we do know things about the past. They'll be recorded. But what can't be known? In other words, what won't be recorded? Is it? Do you know what I mean? Like, they'll know how cars work because there'll be recordings of cars 1,000 years into the future, surely. Like, it'll be.
Will there? How do you know there won't be some huge electro pulse that wipes out every single video in existence? Like, you don't. 1,000 years, a lot can change in 1,000 years. Oh.
Look, you won't hear me arguing about that, man. You have to explain what electro pulses are. Okay, there's been an electro pulse, and and everything's been lost. Except Yeah.
Another way to look at it would be you're sending this podcast to an alien civilization.
Yeah.
You know, that's another way to do it. So, you know, you could take it that way. So there are no YouTube videos of what cars look like. I don't want you to talk about the past, though. You know, this is the way the world used to be. I want you to treat now like it's the past.
Yeah.
This is how things work. So,
what's the most fascinating part of the way we live now that you would want others to know about if they didn't know about it? Like, what's most quintessentially 2019?
Well, what's quintessential or what's interesting? For example, can you imagine sending a message to another life form, right?
Yeah.
On another planet, and saying to them, yes, there are other life forms here on the planet with us. There are all these other sentient beings. And in fact, many of these sentient beings we keep in cages and then murder them, and then we eat their flesh.
That's right. Being animals, that is.
Yes. Oh, I don't know how things roll in Australia, man, but over here. Yes, I do mean animals.
When you say sentient being, I'm picturing something like Yoda, you know what I mean? Like, or E.T., you know?
Yeah.
It's like we have these little beings.
So, there are some things we do that I like the idea of the things we do that might seem strange to people.
I know. It is. There are curious aspects of. I remember someone observing once about aliens if they were watching us and they saw us taking our pets for a walk, and then your dog doing its business on the ground, and then you picking it up. Like, who would you assume was in charge of the planet? Like, between those two beings. It's like, wow, those things are really in charge. He's got that, quite intelligent person.
Those dogs sure got those humans tamed, haven't they?
That's right. Yeah. So the curious way in which we have them around and the way we treat them and treasure them and so forth is quite curious.
How strange would monogamy seem? Or would it seem perfectly natural? I mean, I see the benefits of monogamy, obviously, but, we are these creatures that have all these attractions to members of the opposite sex, but we choose to be with just one and forego the others at some point, and a ritual ceremony is performed. The whole idea of the traditional marriage is very quaint and interesting, isn't it? Like, if we saw animals doing that in Africa, that'd be amazing.
It would be amazing if animals married. That would be it would be great.
Something borrowed, something blue.
That's right. I remember Marge Simpson walking into an episode one time when she was having a bit of a breakdown or something on The Simpsons, and she says, I just realised we haven't had a wedding ceremony for the dog and the cat. They've been living in sin all this time. It's just like, what if we had to marry our animals? Weddings are... Look, there's really good reasons to be married and to have monogamy, but the wedding ceremonies are curious affairs, are they not?
They are. They are indeed.
The vows are powerful, and the kiss is powerful. There's a sense of covenant that's really powerful. But there's all sorts of other stuff, like the particular way that the clothes are, and how people stand, and what they wear, and the rituals. And
I mean, obviously, you and I are going to talk about it with a very Western perspective.
Indeed.
Of who we are, and I'm well aware there are other ways to get married. But you're right. I mean, in many ways, it's like we look back at Egyptology and think of all the strange things they did, and this is what my podcast idea is about. Imagine like telling people in 1,000 years we would put a circular piece of metal on this particular finger to symbolize the union. Like, oh really? They put and we all do it. Like, millions of us are walking around with these little metal rings on our fingers, and it was traditional that a woman would wear a white dress, and this is what a man will wear, and like a person will stand there and they will say these things, and like we look back at Egyptian rituals and just like with absolute wonder and fascination about how they were mummifying people and putting them in pyramids and all that sort of stuff. But we're doing all this amazing stuff too. We just don't think of it in the same way. And I think making this podcast would be a really fun way of looking at all the different things we do. And also, like, I wonder what things we do now that they will wish could have been explained to them. Like, how we always wonder, how the hell did they build the pyramids, or how did they do this with the statues on Easter Island, or what the hell was going on with Stonehenge? What things that we're doing now could be those same mysteries in 1,000 years? Like, what the hell were those people doing in 2019 when they did X, Y, and Z? Sport. Oh my goodness, sport. You know, the World Cup. Everyone in the world, every nation in the world putting together this teams to play this strange sport, and everyone around the world watching it on television, and hundreds of thousands of people going to stadiums to watch this game where a leather inflated ball has been kicked around, and like these things are just wondrous.
Let alone Tommy Ball. Imagine what a mystery Tommy Ball's going to be in future generations.
Imagine if they uncovered an old Tommy Ball episode in the future on the Unmade podcast, and then they looked for evidence of Tommy Ball elsewhere in society and couldn't find it. Like, they'd just be so bemused. It was such a huge sport, and yet this podcast is...
We've found T-shirts.
Yeah. This is the only reference we can find to it, these two guys. And yet millions of people are into this sport.
That's right, that's right. I like to think of podcasting as the sort of, creating podcasts is really like creating the pyramids of today. Like, it's really creating something timeless that's going to persist and define a generation.
Yeah. You keep thinking that, man, if it makes you happy.
Restaurants are strange. You eat at home and then you go out somewhere and eat in a strange place with a strange person.
Yeah.
And different groups of people. To an alien eye might seem peculiar.
Yeah. And how would you explain that? How would you explain why and when you did it? How would you explain that? Well, sometimes you do this, and then there's all these levels of it. There's fast food. There's a quick takeaway. There's like a Starbucks. There's fine dining. Like, there's all these ritualized ways of eating, and then you want to go deep. Like, how do you decide if you're going to go to McDonald's or you're going to go to the really posh restaurant in town? Well, it's all to do with the sense of occasion, and it costs different amounts, and how do you decide? But sometimes the kids would prefer to go to McDonald's because kids like that food, but McDonald's is seen as being unhealthy. But then why do you eat it if it's unhealthy? Well, you do it because it tastes nice. Well, if you like things that taste like, you could, if you were a complete blank slate, you could go so deep on everything. There's such subtlety that we take for granted in everything we do.
Layer upon layer upon layer of assumed knowledge and language and culture. Yeah. Why people behave in certain ways.
But sometimes if you want to impress someone on your date, you'll cook at home. Well, why didn't you take them to a fine restaurant? Oh, because cooking a nice thing for them at home has another layer of meaning to it. But on the other hand, just eating at home and not taking them out to a restaurant is a bad thing. Like, it can go both ways. Under what circumstances is it lazy and poor to just eat at home and, like, unimpressive? And under what circumstances is it the most impressive thing you can do, having someone eat in your home? My head's popping.
I wonder how you would explain, to go back to our previous theme, time, like watches, if you didn't know time. Like, if you looked at a watch, could you tell that what it was doing? This thing's moving around, that it's actually measuring something that's ephemeral. That's a strange concept in itself from a blank perspective.
You could look, if you didn't understand time, you could look at a watch with numbers and movements and think that it's recording background radiation, or is it recording a score of something? I guess the fact that intervals are so, I don't know. Yeah,
they're so regular.
You're going deep now, man.
But it would seem kind of arbitrary in a way at first glance. What is this thing doing?
Imagine if we keep minutes. Imagine if we keep, like, minutes and seconds and hours, right? And then we leave the Earth, and then, like, Earth is gone for some reason. The sun's gone out or blown up or a comet or whatever you want to think. We blow it up ourselves. And humans have travelled somewhere else, and we still have, like, hours and minutes and days, and you'd be like, oh, why is there 24 hours? Oh, because this planet we came from used to rotate on its axis, and that's how long it would take to, point at the sun, and if that stuff gets kept. I guess the question of what I'm trying to achieve with my idea is which of the two things is it? Is it treating humanity like we're animals in a David Attenborough documentary, and we're just being explained to a blank canvas to an alien? Or is it about wanting to communicate with the future and say, you are my people and you are like me, but I want you to know how we did things a long time ago? I think they're kind of two different things. Because if you and I watch an Attenborough documentary and we look at how a pride of lions works, we're like, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know they looked after their cubs like that, and there was one male and various females, and we learn how the structure works. And that's kind of like aliens watching us. Oh, okay, that's what they do. Yet when we look back in history and we look at the Egyptians, we don't look at them like they're animals. We look at them like they're us. And we're like, oh, humans used to believe that. They used to worship the sun. They used to bury themselves like this. This was the games they used to play with jackals and things like that. So it's which of those two things do you want to do? Do you want to make this about treating us like we're animals being watched on TV, or we want to communicate with our future people?
Well, you tell me which it is. So let me give you another topic that's an interesting one to try and observe from afar, and that's fashion, right? Why do people change what they're wearing over time? Why don't they just wear the cheapest and warmest thing that's the most practical? Why do they choose different shapes and colours and pay extra for them from the out? You know what I mean? That's something that from an objective eye seems irrational, and yet is totally instinctive and
easily explained. But you don't often think to explain it. You know, people wanting to differentiate themselves, people being influenced by advertising for commercial market reasons, people trying to make themselves more attractive. Yeah, fashion is easily explained, but rarely explained.
That's right. There's a herd mentality, but within it there's an individuation. People want to seem special or the first to have something, but yet belong and not be too far off. There's a balancing that's going on. Gambling is another one. Gambling, explaining what's going on with the phenomena. What are people doing in those poker machines? Are they playing odds, or when they're watching races?
What a totally weird thing gambling is. People risking what they have to get more of what they have, but it being done in this organised way, so someone can take a cut and there'll be winners and losers. Yeah. I can imagine gambling would seem incredibly strange.
Particularly if you knew the odds that were against you, you know what I mean? Or I guess that says you're putting in little in order to hope to get a lot, even though the odds of getting a lot, you know what I mean? If you're able to observe it across time and how much a poker machine's giving, do you know what I mean? Like it would seem like...
Oh, of course. I think anyone who's mathematically literate can see how stupid gambling is.
Well, that's right. That's right. Absolutely. It's the fascinating part of you're starting to observe behaviour that seems objectively strange and yet is common. What do you think is the most peculiar human behaviour? What can't you believe that people do? Like, do you think skydiving? Like, what's the most... Or do you just I get skydiving, I don't want to do it, but...
I think history has shown that... when we look back at other generations, one of the things we do take the most interest in, and maybe it's because of what gets left behind, is religious belief and ritual. I think people take a tremendous interest in what people used to believe. So I think it's very possible that future generations will take a great interest in what we believe now, because that's this is stuff that's fundamental to our existence, isn't it? What we believe happens after we die and what we believe our purpose is here. So and that is always something I find fascinating and baffling. And we look back at the Egyptians and find it interesting what they believe. There's no reason not to think that in 1,000 years people won't think the same now. That's how things worked back then. That's what they believed. And obviously, these things cause so much conflict and problems and have such an effect on our discourse and political life. So, and a lot of that stuff gets left behind in forms of, monuments and things like that. So,
and I feel to say have a binding effect as well. And,
yes.
And, and a healing effect and a meaning effect and a bonding effect. And
So, I mean, that's something not to be ignored. Perhaps just more recently, it would be really interesting trying to explain things like the internet and social media, and that's something that would be fun to be trying to explain to an outsider, how that has affected our lives and what we do. That we can be together as humans, proximate to each other. We can be sitting in the room together, but all be on our phones, talking to and communicating and trying to impress people who aren't in the room.
Or looking at stories of other people on that's interesting.
Yeah.
There's a person standing in front of you, but you're watching a person and a story of a person.
Yeah, and our own drive to share what we're doing, the whole notion of selfies and going on holidays and taking pictures, and rather than sitting and absorbing what we're looking at, but rather wanting to show other people what we've done. That's a really interesting phenomena that would be really fun to be taking apart in this kind of Attenborough style.
I'll tell you a really interesting cultural artifact or act that continues to happen and be hugely popular in Western culture and yet is a cross-cultural and goes back over thousands of years as well, is the practice of tattooing, which is fascinating. Why people tattoo for, again, religious reasons and cultural reasons, and trying to explain why it occurred in Western culture where there's no, tribal meaning associated with it necessarily, except this looks cool, others have it, I like the pattern. Or, you know what I mean? It's the way it rises and falls, goes from the fringe of society, people in jail, sailors, rough types, underclass, and then comes in through punk and then comes into the main where the, billionaires have a tattoo and Lachlan Murdoch has a tattoo. You know what I mean? They mainstream. Why people do different things with their hair.
Yeah, hairstyles, yep. Millions of episodes. I like the time capsule idea, though. I like treating it like a time capsule. The notion of analysing humans in this kind of Attenborough-style nature documentary way is not like, cutting edge. It's been done before, seriously and humorously. But I like the idea of trying to create, because you could take it quite seriously, but I like the idea of like addressing it at them, not you and I talking to our contemporary listeners about, isn't it interesting that we do our hair this way, but sitting down and trying to explain it in this like blank canvas way.
Give me an example of that then. How would that, I've not quite grasped that. So you'd say, okay, today I'm going to describe to you this particular behaviour.
Dear person of the future,
Yep.
Today I want to talk to you about hair and hairstyling. I don't know if you still have hair, but in our time, all the humans would have this fibrous substance growing from all sorts of parts of our body, but particularly the tops of our heads.
Yeah.
People at all different parts of the planet would have this hair, which served the purpose of keeping our head warm. But as time moved on, it became more and more a part of our body we would use to express ourselves, and you'd start to explain how people would do. Some people would put viscous substances in their hair, enabling it to defy the gravitational field of the Earth and stand at strange angles. Some people would take pigments and change the colour of their hair. Hair in our time, naturally, as the aging process would take effect, would change colour. It would lose a lot of its pigment. It would become grey and white in colour, which became a symbol of one's age. Some people would attempt to defy this natural process and appear younger than they in fact were by adding coloured pigment to that white or grey hair, restoring it to a colour that would be more associated with a younger person.
Some people's hair would be wet in the morning and would slowly dry from the bottom up, from the back.
Yeah, but hair. It was very common in our time because I'm assuming like in the future, probably male pattern baldness will be cured by science. So it was common in that time, particularly
by advanced hair.
to lose hair. This was the stigma that would come with baldness could be approached in various ways. Some men would shave off their hair and embrace their baldness, and it was even seen as a sign of virility. And other men would you go into wigs, wouldn't you, and toupees?
Oh yeah,
would create false all these different things, and explaining why and how they do it.
That's good, man. Well done.
Anyway,
I've learnt more about hair in 2 minutes than I've ever known.
Happy to help.
Pretty good with the scissors and the hair. I think this is guiding you in a particular direction. It is a fascinating idea. I wonder if this would benefit from having some people come in and talk about. Well, personally, you could have a host who's able to curate it in a particular way, but you could actually have some different folks come in and talk. And if they could adopt the style, have real expertise in a particular area, be able to describe sociologists and whomever. If they could get into the style of describing, they could give you a systematic overview of a particular area that could be really quite interesting to listen to, actually. What feels like the most redundant line on the internet is the first line on Wikipedia. So when you're all the things that we've been talking about, you know what I mean? You so often look up something on Wikipedia and the first line is the bleeding obvious exactly what it is. Yeah, and then it goes on from there into really interesting information.
Yeah, you're right. In some ways, it is like the start of a Wikipedia. I've got a really good Wikipedia idea, actually, for a podcast that I'll do in a future episode. But yeah, you're right. Wikipedia kind of... encyclopedias, in fact, in general, but Wikipedia, like, do kind of do what I'm talking about. But I'm almost taking it to another level, because Wikipedia and encyclopedias are written for people now. So there's some things... I think there are some things you still take for granted, whereas I think you want to go even... But yeah, you're right. Encyclopedias do this. We have a second sponsor today, and this is... Well, you know who it is.
I do. Hover.
Yes.
We need Hover T-shirts. Unmade podcast Hover T-shirts. I think they've almost reached that level. I think people want them.
Hover must do T-shirts. They must have merch. I'm going to contact at Hover and see if they've got any Hover T-shirts that we can wear. Look, let's tell people what they already know. Hover, absolute go-to place for registering domain names. I register loads and loads of domain names with Hover. Some that I use every day, some, for my websites and things. Others that I'm sitting on for little future ideas that I have that might be a bit secret. Even Tim has registered a domain with Hover, as we know now.
Absolutely.
timhine.ninja. And at the moment, if you go to timhine.ninja, because he has not yet attached it to his Ninja website, which I'm sure is coming at some point, at the moment it diverts to Hover itself. Or you can go to hover.com/unmade. And if you do either of those things, timhine.ninja or hover.com/unmade, you are going to go to a landing page where you're going to get 10% off your first Hover purchase of domain names. I can think of very few people, other than like animals and stuff like that, that could have absolutely no need for a domain name in some way if you were being creative. Obviously, people in business and doing things like me have a lot of need for domain names. But even if you're just like not that kind of person, having a domain name can be really handy, whether it's just for like your CV or a brochure site for yourself, or some party or wedding or something you're having you might want to create a little website for. You want to get the best possible domain name. Hover is the place to be.
All Sentinel beings need a domain name. Is that what you're saying, man?
Not all, but certainly any that are listening to this podcast.
Okay,
I can
fair
imagine
enough.
could have a use. Could have a use. I don't think like horses are sentient, aren't they? And maybe a horse could have a domain name. Although a horse would find it really hard hitting the keys to do the search on the website to find out what's available.
They would use hoofer, not hover. Oh, sorry, that's a terrible...
I like where you were going.
That's a terrible joke. Anyway.
I wonder what horse-related domains are currently available on Hover.
Horse.ninja would be a very...
Oh, is horse.ninja available?
timhine.ninja and horse.ninja. Horse.org.au is available.
Really?
Yeah. I would have thought... That's bizarre. I would have thought that was...
Horse.business is available?
Gee, the horses just aren't... They're not engaged in...
Look, horse.fashion is available. So if you're someone who makes like those big rugs that they put over horses after races, and you want horse.fashion for your website, get in there. Get in there while you can. This is the thing.
And horse.furniture. Who's making furniture out of horses? That's not on.
Well, what about horse.dental for people who give horses in the mouth?
That's very good. That's good. Horse.creditcard. Jeez, horses have come a long way, haven't they?
Sometimes they go too far.
They do.
And they get themselves into a lot of debt. Horse.fm is available. Surely someone is making a horse podcast already and they want horse.fm.
Oh, that's great.
Horse.singles, if you want to create a matching site for horses when you want to breed for breeders, horse breeding's a big thing. Surely horse.singles is $29.99 you get horse.singles.
My they got horse.restaurant here, which reminds me of when we were in Holland, my mum was aghast at the idea of eating horse, right? Which, was done in Holland, is probably still done in Holland, horse meat. And until she came home one day and they'd cooked it up and it was beautiful and didn't know what it was. And she sat down, this is magnificent, what is this? Until it was only when it was done that, Dad broke the news, well, that was horse. And Mum was horrified at the idea because she'd grown up on a farm riding horses, and it's a mental cultural Horse.download. Did you know you could download horses, man?
Yeah, you can 3D print them, I'm sure. Look, whatever you're into, whether it's horses or not, if you've got something, some project you want to do now, or Tim, stop reading out horse domains.
Sorry,
I need to finish the ad. Whatever you're into, I see they have horse.baby, also known as a pony, but whatever you're into, or it should be a foal, shouldn't it? Is a foal as a baby horse? What's a pony then?
Foal. A pony's just a small horse, I think.
A pony's a small horse. All right. We need someone to create a horse website to tell us all this stuff. And when they do, they're going to need a domain. And where are they going to get their domain, Tim?
Hover.
Exactly. They're going to go to hover.com/unmade. End of ad.
I'm just checking that pony thing. Hang on. My Little Pony.
Let's finish the show with an idea from a patron.
Yes.
If you support us on Patreon, you are helping us make more episodes. You will go onto our wall of thanks where we list all the people who are helping us. We appreciate you, but you will also be in the running to send us an idea of your own that we may discuss on the show, as I'm about to do now. What have we got here? I haven't read this in advance, which I know is dangerous. But let's go with it. We've got Vern, who is from Reading in Massachusetts. That's interesting, actually, because I know when America adopts the names of UK cities and towns, they often change the pronunciation. So over here, it's Reading. I wonder if Americans have called it Reading, or they have stayed with Reading. I don't know. Vern is a software product manager. What does he say here? He says he's a high-tech marketing software guy. The podcast really helps when he's having office space moments each week. A fun fact about him is that he plays traditional old-time music on Sunday nights at a local Irish pub near Boston.
Who would have thought there'd be an Irish pub near Boston?
I know. Amazing. His podcast idea is called Bury the Hatchet. The concept is each episode brings together people from two groups that have some well-known grudge or issue and asks, can they bury the hatchet? However, the grudge or issue is totally made up and the moderator and participants are in on it. The groups are just obscure enough that most of the audience can't be 100% sure. Here's an initial list of episode ideas he's come up with.
Yeah.
Violinists and cellists. Violinists having long considered cellist the lesser talent in the orchestra. Is that fair? Can we get them to see the cellist as equals? Another idea. Dark energy versus dark matter physicists. There has never been a single shared conference or journal covering both, ever. Can our participants agree that the universe is big enough for the two dark mysteries at once? And another one, which I think he thinks is made up, but it's not. Aussies and Kiwis. He says this was the inspiration for his idea, since as an American, I'm pretty sure it's just fun, but you can never really be sure. Vern says he loves the Unmade podcast, and there's his idea. And can I say, cracker of an idea.
That's a great idea. It's a fantastic idea.
Cracker.
I love the cellist and violinist, that's for sure. Yeah.
This would be a good idea as a serious podcast, but I like it even more as the funny, like, you know, going deep with things that you couldn't think could possibly have a grudge.
That's right. Because you know that this is where real tension comes out in communities. It's between, you know what I mean, the very small, detailed changes and splits between small communities.
Yeah.
You know, the smaller the stakes, the higher the stakes, if you like. You know what I mean? Like it goes to the classic the life of Brian, isn't it? Between the Judean People's Front and the People's Front of Judea. You know, that sort of
exactly.
yeah.
But the funny thing is, the more, like, the deeper Vern goes here with the ideas of these niche things that couldn't possibly have a grudge, I think that in some ways they're the most likely to have a grudge. Like, because they're such experts and their beliefs are so, like, grounded in knowledge that it can sometimes be like I can imagine violinists and cellists, there would be beef about who's better, who's more important, who should be paid more, you know?
No, the beef would be between different violinists, surely. Like the first chair, second chair, that's where the tension would be.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, because you go even deeper. And an even bigger beef would be between two first chairs from two different orchestras.
That's right.
Like, the more specialised you go, the deeper the beef.
And you get them into a real argument. That's a great idea, with lots of inside information as to why.
Whereas someone who likes classical music and someone who doesn't wouldn't have much of a fight, really, would they?
No.
It'd be like, oh yeah, I really like it. And the other person is, oh, I think it's really boring. Discussion over. But violinists versus cellists, then you go deep because there's so much to talk about.
Yeah. There's a lot in this. This would have a lot of potential for humour if it was done really well. But I also think it could work with real people too. I can just imagine getting people in from a highly refined area of the culture somewhere and asking them deep questions about what really annoys them about other people, like in their industry and by others, the people sitting, the trombonists and, within life in an orchestra. That would be, I think things would come out.
This is my whole life with scientists and mathematicians.
Oh, really?
Like, especially when the camera's not rolling. Yeah. The stuff that, the rivalry and the politics and all that stuff. Oh, it's delicious.
Between people in their field, you mean? Or across? Wow.
Yeah. And people who have different, really niche specialized things. Like I think this is how this equation works and this is how this is going to get proven and other people feel opposite, and it can be deep held beliefs.
And is it sort of like, and he would say that because he's, you know what I mean? Like, does it get a bit personal sometimes?
It can be, and competitive, and yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's good fun.
Very entertaining.
Bury the hatchet. As suggested by Vern from Reading in Massachusetts.
The one detail I'd changed, Vern, is don't call it bury the hatchet. I mean, just, leave the hatchet out. Like, keep the hatchet.
Yeah.
Dig up the hatchet.
Hold the hatchet.
Part. Yeah.
Swing the hatchet.
Swing the hatchet, yeah. But get more hatchets.
Swing it hard.
Hand out the hatchets.
More hatchets. We need more hatchets. We need a bigger hatchet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, there's a lot of, I think that's there's a lot of, just listening to people argue and fight. If they can do it well and it would be, A, it'd be a great thing to learn about their curious little worlds, and B, it'd just be really entertaining if they could get really upset.
Yeah.
No, well done, Vern. Nice work.
Well done. Thanks, Vern, and thanks for being a patron.
Just to bring that full circle as well for Vern, you could have the people from Reading and the people from Reading arguing over the correct pronunciation of their town's name.
Just for the record, I don't know that Americans call it Reading. I'm just basing that on Notre Dame and Notre Dame and a few other places. But
yeah. Speaking of Massachusetts, I watched a documentary about the Bee Gees the other day, and that was fascinating.
You're obsessed with the Bee Gees at the moment.
What? Why?
I don't know.
When did I mention them?
You keep texting me about it and how much you love Barry Gibb.
Not how. I did not text you about how much I love Barry Gibb.
You do. You keep telling me you think he's really handsome. You do. Do you deny it?
No. Yeah. Yes, I do deny it.
Did you not tell me that you think he's by far and away the most handsome Bee Gee?
What I was saying was, I thought it was ironic that he was the eldest, right? And he was the one with the thick hair. The other two lost their hair.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And yet he was the eldest, and then he lived the longest as well. And I thought that was particularly, strange and coincidental for him to be both.
And he's also and he had the good voice, didn't he? He's the voice of the Bee Gees, isn't he? He had the voice.
Well, yeah. I mean, he did the falsetto, so he came to the fore, particularly at the end. But Robin sang Massachusetts and some of those early songs and so forth, but then he was kind of the guy that just stood there, I think, towards the end.
But didn't you say something to me along the lines of that? Because didn't Barry Gibb have some relationship with Barbra Streisand?
Well, they did an album together, the Guilty album. Yeah.
Okay. Because I thought you said you were really jealous that Barbra Streisand got to spend so much time with Barry Gibb. Well, maybe you didn't say that, but you definitely brought up him being the most handsome, and I took that. I decided to take that where I wanted to take it.
Man, our private BG text messages.
Yeah, you went through. It was 3 or 4 days that you were sending me BG's text messages. I was like, what the hell? What's with all the BG's texts?
So, which of the BGs do you think is the best looking BG?
Barry Gibb.
No.
It's gorgeous.
Now you're the one going on about it, man. Just go up shit.
Let me look at him in his prime and let me tell you if I think he's really good looking. I have to look at it through 70s goggles, don't I? Oh, hang on.
We don't have 70s goggles.
Look at his Wikipedia page. Barry Gibb, Sir Barry Gibb. Look at him with that big head of hair, beard.
Yeah. Who was the other one with the hat? He was he was quite talented.
Barry's got barrygib.com. I wonder if he got it on Hover.
How early do you reckon he got barrygig.com? Like it's a sign of going solo. Is it one of those things where if you're in a band, right, and then suddenly, would you be looking around to see, has our solo artist registered his solo name yet?
Yeah, good point. But I just went to barrygib.com and I clicked on like the menu for photos because I want to look at pictures of him. And it just says coming soon. Like, you're 72, Barry. When are you going to put photos on your web? What are you waiting for?
Is he going to get even more good looking? I mean,
Photos coming soon.
I'm not in my prime yet. I'm still getting.
He's got a Twitter account. Hang on. How many Twitter followers do you think Barry Gibb's got without looking?
Oh, he might have 5 if no one knows it's there, or he might have about 1 million, I guess. No, 500,000.
He's got less than me. 43,000. That's less than me.
Wow.
That's a travesty.
Wow.
He hasn't tweeted since 2018. He's obviously busy working on that photo gallery.
That's right. Have you ever seen the Bee Gees live? Did you see them?
No, I have not.
You saw the Beach Boys, didn't you? You love the Beach Boys.
I've seen the Beach Boys. Beach Boys are great. Well, on that note, we must sign off. Tim's got Bee Gees research to do. Barry Gibb photos to look at. Although you won't find them on his website, but anyway, I'm sure you'll find them somewhere. Your personal stash. That reminds me. Remind me to tell you something very funny when we get off air in a minute.
You can't end the episode saying that.
I just did.